Thank you, and thank you all for coming out. I know it's a temptation to stay at your desk today because it's Prime Day, right? So I'll try to substitute for that, and you can get back to your shopping afterwards. But actually, I'm going to talk about that a little bit. But anyway, so what I want to talk about today is, as my title says, I'm going to try to fit in 5 incredibly important earth-shaking trends in consumer behavior. And the challenge is I'm going to try to do it in 20 minutes. So I lived in New York for a while, and that means I can talk really fast. So you think I can do it? I'm going to try to get through all 5 in 20 minutes. So bear with me. Why are these earth-shaking trends? Well, you know, there's a Chinese curse that says, "May you live in interesting times." That's a curse. And definitely for marketers, these are interesting times. I think you'll all agree. Every day we wake up, we're not quite sure what the landscape looks like. There's some new app out there, or there's something that is changing the way that marketers and companies talk to customers. And so it's a constant challenge. It's a tremendous amount of fun, but it's definitely a challenge to try to stay on top of this and try to really take the pulse of today's consumer, because things are changing with lightning speed, with unbelievably fast, definitely faster than anything I've seen in my 100 or 200 years of doing this kind of stuff. Some days it feels like that. So let's jump into it. And one of the things that we have to recognize is that to any marketer, no matter who you're dealing with, the #1 priority today and the biggest challenge today is consumer engagement. That is just getting the attention of your customers. I don't care if it's B2B, I don't care if it's housewives, if it's seniors, if it's millennials, if it's industrial lighting salesmen. That is the #1 challenge, and it's incredibly difficult to do, partly because we're just so distracted all the time. Everybody's constantly on their phones. Is anybody here on their phone yet? No, not yet. Okay, good. So this is the holy grail, and I just love this little cartoon, so I thought I'd throw that in there. Really, because reality TV, whether you like it or not, I'm not a big fan myself, but one thing I will say about reality TV is that they know how to provide customer engagement. So people who watch reality TV take it very, very seriously. And I always hesitate to tell them, you know, this is actually scripted. And it's kind of an oxymoron. There's nothing less realistic than reality TV. I hate to burst your bubble, but the point is that this is one way that you get consumers' attention, like with a laser focus. And that's really important. Now, how do marketers respond to this? Well, marketers are still trying to figure this out, and one thing that marketers tend to do is they like to fall back on traditional ways of looking at customers. And especially what they like to do, I believe, is to put customers into little boxes. Any of you watch Weeds? Were you fans of the show Weeds? I won't sing it to you, but at the beginning, there's a theme song at the beginning, and part of the song says the people in the houses all went to the university, and they all got put in boxes, little boxes, all the same. And it's all about basically understanding your consumers by putting them into boxes, and then everybody who's in that same box gets treated exactly the same way. And guess what? That's exactly what we teach our students in Marketing 101. From the first day they set foot in a marketing class, we teach them, find out what your customers have in common with one another, treat them all the same, and that's what makes your marketing more efficient. That's the basic mindset that we teach students from the time that they're undergraduates all the way through if they get MBAs and then go into business. And so people seem to think, as I like to say, there are 2 kinds of people in this world. People who think there are 2 kinds of people and people who don't. Now, I happen to be in the latter category. I've been studying consumers a long time. It's very, very difficult to put them into boxes. Yet this is exactly what we do. You all, I know the term market segmentation. This is, again, Marketing 101. This is the gospel of marketing, and basically that's exactly what it means. Let's put people into boxes. Let's give them categories like, are they rich or poor? Where do they live? Are they in the north or the south, east or west? Are they male or female? Are they young or old? And on and on. And by so doing, then when we put our consumers into these boxes, we pull out a prearranged strategy that tells us how to deal with consumers who have fallen into those boxes. But there's a slight problem with that, and that is that consumers don't like to be put into boxes. Anybody here like to be put into a box? Probably not. I know that I don't. So what I want to do today is to quickly, in 20 minutes or less, I hope, review some of the major boxes that we use to think about customers and the marketplace. And so I'm going to review 5 major distinctions or dichotomies that everybody, just about everybody in the business world, really just assumes are true. And I'm going to make the case to you that every single one of them is no longer true. And once you start understanding that those boxes no longer exist, it can have a profound impact on the way you think about your customers. So these are the 5 categories or boxes that I'm going to go through. One is the distinction between being offline and online. The second is the distinction between work and play. The third is our self, our bodies, our minds, and the things that we own, making those separate. The fourth is me versus we. In other words, me as an individual versus the people that I hang out with, the people whose opinions matter to me, the people that I work with, etc. And the final distinction is between those of us who consume and those of us who produce. No longer a valid distinction. And again, when we break down those barriers, it opens up, again, we're living in interesting times, as I said, but it opens up tons of new opportunities for people in virtually every line of business. So let me start with number 1, the distinction between being offline and online. And I'll start by saying, when you travel a lot, you wind up sitting next to people, especially when you start to get a little gray hair. They love to show you pictures of their grandchildren. You ever notice that? How obnoxious is that? Like you care about their grandchildren, right? This is my granddaughter, Rose. And Rose, she's actually a little older now, but my point is not to bore you with pictures of my grandchildren. Live in LA, not the leading authorities LA, the other LA. And that means that we don't get to see them too much in the flesh, a few times a year. However, we several years ago discovered this amazing invention that some of you might have heard of, and it's called Skype. And Skype, I think, is one of those technologies that has been adopted first by grandparents as opposed to young people, because it's a very cheap and easy way to stay in touch with your family, right? Now, the reason I mention this is that I started to think about it, as we would have our Skype conversations with Rose, I realized that sometimes she's talking to us, like face to face. But many times she's talking to us, on a computer screen. She's on a screen or on a phone screen, and we're on the screen. And I started thinking, as Rose gets older and she's growing up in this digital world that we live in, will she make a distinction between the grandparents who are in the flesh and the grandparents that she sees on the phone? And the answer I came up with is absolutely not. And when I talk to my own students who are a little older than Rose, 18, 19, 20 or older, what I realize is they don't make that distinction, and many of you guys don't make that distinction. If you're millennials, if you're what we call digital natives, you don't make the kind of distinction that old people make. See, I like to spend time online, but I'm a dinosaur, because when I go online, I say to myself, okay, now I'm going online. And then when I'm done, I'm going offline. And my proposal to you is that distinction is no longer valid, because what we're finding is that consumers effortlessly and without much thought are going offline and online all day long. So all of this talk about, do we need an online strategy? What should be our offline strategy? That is a waste of time, I think, for many retailers and manufacturers. So this dichotomy between the physical world and the digital world, that's got to go. That's got to go. Now, why do people go into digital environments? Well, some people say, well, it's because, you know, they can't stand the real world. You know, they want to go out and they want to, you know, live this. I've got a first life. I'm busy enough in that life. I don't need a second life. You know, but I think there's much more to it than that. And so as these new technologies are coming on board, and again, just about every day something different is coming on, we start to see the possibilities when we break down these barriers. So for example, this is a diagram that I stole when I was doing some work with Intel on virtual connections between people. And Intel, this is how they think about the world. So they talk about rich visual interfaces. And what they mean is, what are all the different ways that we can use technology to allow people to see each other and to connect with each other, even though they're not necessarily in the same room? And so they talk about two basic avenues to do this. One is technology to enhance the actual world, and I'm going to talk more about that. So for example, augmented reality, which is something I'm going to come back to. How many of you have heard the term augmented reality? Okay, those of you who haven't, you're going to be hearing it very, very soon. On the other hand, we can create entirely new digital worlds. How many of you have heard of virtual reality? Yeah, more hands go up because that's gotten more of the press, although ironically, I would argue that augmented reality is what you're going to be seeing more so than virtual reality. But in each case, we're finding ways to allow technology to work with us to enrich what we do all day long, going in and out of these virtual environments without giving it much thought. And we can see evidence of this in the business world. We see that Microsoft last year paid $2.5 billion for a game company, Minecraft. We see Amazon paid $1 billion for a gaming network called Twitch. Has anybody heard of Twitch? Some of you have heard of Twitch. Incredibly profitable sphere of business that most of us had never heard of before. We see that Facebook spent $2 billion to buy the technology called Oculus Rift. Has anybody experienced an Oculus Rift virtual reality headset? You're going to start to see that more and more. So all the major tech giants have recognized in their own ways that this is the future of consumer behavior. So in a sense, what we're doing is we're going through the looking glass, just like Alice did. We're jumping through the mirror and we're entering a different world where we are living in a digital reality, in addition, not instead of, but in addition to our physical reality. So sometimes when we look in the mirror, it's a little hard to see, you know, for those of us who are spending many hours a day, how many hours a day on average do you think the average teenager in the Western world spends looking at a screen? Any guesses? 6 to 8?
I'd say 10.
Okay, it's up to 11 and a half. It was 6 to 8 a few years ago. So you can see that a good chunk of time is being spent in these digital environments, and marketers better understand that. So we have the opportunity with technology to do amazing and kind of scary things, what I sometimes call reality engineering. That is, using technology to alter what we literally see in the real world. So this is an example. This is a soccer game, and every time the players go across midfield, this Ruffles potato chips logo comes up. So that's great exposure for Ruffles, no big deal, right? But the truth is that if you're in the stadium watching this game, you do not see that logo. That's only if you're watching it on television. So just like the technology that puts the yard, you know, the down markers in a football game, we can actually superimpose anything on a TV screen. So don't believe what you see on TV, especially today. So what has that done? Well, it's created lots of these virtual worlds that are out there. Many of you have never heard of them. Some of you have. If any of you ever played The Sims, maybe when you were in high school or college, that's an example of a successful virtual world, actually the most successful video game in history. The movie Avatar really helped to promote this notion that we can create these identities, send ourselves into these other worlds, and interact with people, even if you're a 10-foot tall blue guy like the hero in Avatar. So what's amazing about this, and really interesting, I think, for a lot of companies that are dealing with design, with fashion, interior design, automotive design, et cetera, is that we can literally make ourselves into anything we want. We can alter our facial appearance. We can render amazing detail in terms of fashion, apparel, furnishings, et cetera. And what we find is that when people go into cyberspace, they usually tend to, shall we say, modify their identity a little bit. So this is a real woman. You can kind of see her story. She's got some bags under her eyes. She's got these 2 kids that are making her nuts all day long. She probably needs to lose a little weight. The usual story. Now, what does she look like when she goes through that looking glass? Well, there she is. That's literally her identity in cyberspace. So you can see that she's had a little work done, so to speak, at least digitally. So these technologies are being used in lots of amazing ways. They're going to be used in education. This is actually the lobby of my business school. This is a virtual version of my university that a colleague and I created, where we can offer classes in there. IBM is doing a tremendous amount of enterprise training, as are some other firms, in these virtual environments where they don't have to fly their trainees all over the world. They can all sit together virtually and get this coursework delivered. We have many virtual stores. A tremendous fashion industry is thriving in these virtual worlds. We're starting to see advertising in there, so Diesel Jeans, for example, is in there. Even some licensing. This guy, I always forget what his current, is he Snoop Dogg or Lion, or he's one of these Snoop guys, but he's got a licensed likeness here in this virtual world. This is a virtual store that a major chain is using to test how they lay out their various products and look at what shoppers are going to be grabbing and so on, as opposed to building an actual store, which is very expensive in order to manipulate these things. Trade shows. Many of you spend time at trade shows, or you book people for trade shows. There are now virtual trade shows where people don't have to fly to Vegas for a week and do whatever they do there. They can actually just sit at their desktop and visit with one another in a virtual space. Sales meetings is another example. This is an application that I actually did for Avon, for their Mark brand, their younger brand, and this is having their distributors, the Mark distributors, who don't normally get to meet one another, have the opportunity to meet together in a virtual environment and exchange advice about how to sell their product and throw home parties and so on. This is a little bit of technology that I just want to share with you. You all remember Google Glass, right? Okay. Now, Google Glass has been taken off the market temporarily because of some privacy concerns. I can assure you that you're going to see it back in various incarnations. Just watch this carefully. If I can get this guy to go.
Hey, this is Ryan from Untitled. We're obsessed here with low latency avatar communication, and we've been taking advantage of all this cool hardware that's been sent to us. Glass being one of those, and you can see that we built a simple APK here that transmits its sensor data, glass's sensor data over UDP to our client, and moves the avatar's head as I move around. We've got it locked in at about 50 hertz. Pretty cool stuff.
So you might think that's just a geek playing with his toys, but think about the future of this kind of technology, because what it means is that clients are going to be able to sit in a room and, let's say, do a sales training exercise, for example, and as they move and talk to one another, the avatars on the screen are going to exactly mirror their movements. So it's kind of like the Microsoft Kinect game. Some of you may know that, where you can play tennis or something like that, but it's kind of that on steroids, and that's going to be the future of a lot of this stuff. And of course, virtual reality, that I could talk about that for another hour, but I won't do that today. But you're going to see a lot of these. I had the opportunity to test virtual reality technology before it went to market using a roller coaster program. And let me tell you, you really think that you're on a roller coaster when you're wearing those goggles. And it's, you might get a little queasy, but it's pretty amazing stuff. So what about moving online to offline? We're spending all this time online. Some of you may be aware of this huge phenomenon called cosplay. If you go to Comic-Con, people who like to dress up as their favorite superheroes and all that, this is a huge global phenomenon, originated in Tokyo but is now worldwide. Another application some of you may be familiar with, and I won't ask you, I won't embarrass you, but online dating has become a huge thing where you basically project an identity online and then you hopefully take that offline with the man or woman of your dreams, right? Now, that is a very strategic process because you don't just take any picture of yourself with bedhead and you just woke up. You're very strategic about the profile that you post. And in fact, many online daters are working with their friends or maybe even professionals to craft the identity that they project online because they take this very seriously. Now, in spite of that, typically you might see a guy like a profile like this, and when you see that, you know that he probably looks like that in the real world. But nonetheless, this has become a very established way for people to meet each other. So a very large proportion of people in the U.S. who are getting married today have actually met their spouses online. And then we have the integration between the online and the offline. So some of you already on your phones have capabilities like this where you can hold your phone up in front of a store and you're going to get information about what might be on sale that day, etc. That just came out today, right? I like to be current. So Pokemon Go is augmented reality with a vengeance. And this is going to be probably the best thing for augmented reality companies because it's getting everybody talking about what you can do with these things, whether it's getting mugged or, there's some of the bad things that are happening with it as well. But basically, all of this wearable computing that we're hearing about, all of these industries that are being transformed by wearable computing, starting with Google Glass, but many others as well, this is really, really important stuff that a lot of people in business just don't seem to be aware of yet. So Microsoft has their HoloLens. Some of you may have seen this, which is an incredibly, if we had the time, I could take you in and show you a demo of that, but you can Google it, and you can see that these objects are now going to come to life in your living room or wherever and look as if they are really there. But of course, they are just holograms. So augmented reality has a lot of really cool applications, again, especially for retailers, I think, who aren't thinking about this so much. Because what we can do is we can take simple static store displays and we can turn them into really, really amazing things. So I want to show you a quick demo of, this is an agency that I work with. If I can get this to work. Just bear with me here. This is an agency that does augmented reality applications.
Is that she in the thing, the girl who's helping out?
She's holding it up in front of a picture, and it's bringing the person to life. And the same thing here with a magazine now. So you could take a static store catalog or an ad in a magazine, hold your phone over it, and it's going to bring up an entirely new experience. So these are just some examples of the kinds of applications that retailers, and think about retailers, no matter what type of retailers you may work with, not just clothing and cosmetics, to be able to bring packages to life in a really amazing, captivating way. And then finally, we have so-called biohacking, which is a brand new thing. Has anybody heard of biohacking? This means everyday people who are literally implanting stuff into their bodies, kind of like wearables, like an Apple Watch, but you put it into your wrist instead. So, for example, this is an indicator that monitors a person's blood sugar, but the person has actually implanted it in their arm. So you can walk around with these sensors going on and off. That's called biohacking. Do-it-yourself biology, sometimes it's called. Okay, moving on to the next distinction, trying to talk quickly. Work versus play. Well, first of all, telecommuting. I know many of you guys telecommute, and we have people at offices all around the country who are talking to people here in Washington. So as of last year, over a third of US employees have already worked remotely. So already the boundary between work and play is going to start to diminish a little bit. But of course, we also have what's now being called cyber slacking. Now this doesn't apply to anybody in this room. I know, but a large amount of purchases are made during the day, and even more traffic on porn sites is going on. Again, definitely not in these offices, but somewhere else in the country.
That's really bad.
Yeah. But more generally, we have people in all walks of life. We have students. This is what my students look like when I walk in, hopefully not when I walk out of class. Customers, and we have employees that need to be engaged. I said at the beginning, engagement is the holy grail. So how do we do it? Well, it's really tough, especially in the workplace. According to this Gallup poll, 70% of US employees hate their jobs. Again, nobody in here, right? So what do we do? Well, how many of you have heard of gamification? It's becoming a really hot term. I actually teach a course on gamification at my university. What does it mean? Does it mean playing Candy Crush at your desk or Pokemon Go now? Absolutely not. What it means is applying gaming principles to non-gaming context. In other words, taking tasks that are mundane or boring and turning them into fun so that people will be motivated to do them. Now, it doesn't have to be fancy. This is a campaign that Volkswagen did in Scandinavia. Here we have a typical escalator going up, and they want to encourage people to take the stairs instead. You know, it's better for your heart and all that. But how do you do it when they can take the escalator? It's right there. Well, what they did was they built a staircase that actually mimics the functions of a piano. So as you step on the different keys, it makes a noise, and people can run up and down the stairs, and they can play their favorite songs and so on. 66% more people took the stairs just because they were given the opportunity to have a little fun with it. So that's gamification right there. Now, you're more likely to see it in these contexts. You're more likely to see leaderboards. You've all seen them. You may not have known it was gamification. You might have earned badges for different things, like who drank the most number of martinis last night. You get a badge for that on Foursquare. I mean, they do have those badges. But gamification is serious stuff. It just makes it fun. So, for example, you all might have some kind of a competition where people in different offices try to lose more weight than people in other divisions of the company. That's becoming very common. That's an example of corporate or enterprise gamification. On the other hand, we have many examples of consumer gamification. For example, in this application, Volvo is literally paying people with points to watch commercials for Volvo on their cell phones. So rather than just having the commercial pop up on your phone and you don't want to see it, you actually will earn points that you can apply toward prizes if you're willing to sit and watch the commercial. This is an application I did for Campbell's Soup, where we basically turn the development of new products into a game where millennials are coming in and they're given points and they compete against other teams of millennials to come up with new flavors for soups, because Campbell's need millennials to buy more soup. Okay, moving right along, our third barrier, the self versus what we own. So really, you all know the expression, you are what you buy, or you are what you drive, you are what you wear, sometimes you are what you eat, you know, all these things. The things that we own are a part of who we are. Now, this is the first animated tattoo. What this guy has done is he's actually created, he's got a QR code tattooed onto his chest, and so when you put your phone onto his chest, it will bring up an animated tattoo, much like that, the other application I showed you before, except it's literally on his body. We know that people and the things that they buy tend to become alike. They form part of your identity. You're not anybody yourself without the things that you own. That helps to define who you are. And of course, a lot of that is very deliberate. You know, we have medical tourism, so to speak, which is a euphemism sometimes for going to get work done in Brazil and places like that. There's, needless to say, billions of dollars being spent on that every year as people are trying to integrate these technologies into their bodies. And of course, we have new applications like this. I hope this is not really that pig's lips. I hope that was photoshopped on, otherwise I'm going to have a nightmare tonight. But it looks pretty realistic. So we know that digitization is what, for example, people in advertising use all the time. Here we have, for example, an attractive woman, but there's no way she's going to appear in an ad. She's too flawed. She has wrinkles. Oh no. So what's she going to look like by the time she gets onto an advertisement? That's going to be her. And this is what happens with virtually every advertisement you've ever seen for any male or female, I guarantee you. In the old days, we used to manage our identities on paper. So we had this thing called a resume. Some of you may remember those. Mm-hmm. And there was a tremendous amount of detail about where things exactly have to go and so on. But today, it's much more digitized because we might submit a digital resume. We might submit a video instead. And again, there's a lot of interesting things going on in the HR space, I think, in terms of how consumers are using digital technologies to modify the impression they make to employers. And if you stayed up late on Saturday night and took too many pictures of yourself and posted them on Facebook and don't want them on Sunday morning, you can even erase them for a fee. That's a business opportunity. Reputation Defender will go in and erase your Facebook trail for you. Okay, me versus we. In my day, we had an expression, do your own thing. Today, it's kind of changed a bit. Today, people are all about social approval. So I've noticed that this is sometimes called food porn, where people feel that they have to take a picture of everything that's put in front of them in a restaurant and post it before they can legitimately eat it. It becomes, you need that social approval. So what used to be the era of me is now the era of we. And we talk about crowdsourcing, for example. You've all heard that term, where we're relying on large numbers of people to generate ideas that used to be created by individuals sitting in silos. We have a lot of platforms like Indiegogo and Kickstarter, et cetera, that are all about getting everyday consumers to fund various products or charities, et cetera, group activities. Now, what does that mean for marketers? Well, this is the way Google thinks about how people shop, and they call it the zero moment of truth. And what that means is that traditionally, you go through this process where you search for things that you want. Today, you read reviews online, you do all that, you go on Yelp, et cetera. You watch videos, perhaps, about the different options. You ask your network, then you go to the store and buy. That's what Google thinks of as the zero moment of truth. The moral here is that all of this stuff used to be done after you went to the shelf.
Right.
But now people are doing it beforehand, and that is really, really important for retailers. So here we have, for example, a haul video. Does anybody know what a haul video is? A couple of you. Google the term haul videos, and there will be thousands of them that come up. They're mostly young girls who basically come back from a shopping trip and they create a video that shows you what their haul was. They went to a certain store, they're going to take stuff out of the bag and describe everything in minute detail. And they have thousands and thousands of followers, believe it or not. So the new moment of truth is this. We have what we call social shopping, which means that the shopper simulates the traditional shopping experience of going to a store, trying on 10 different pairs of jeans. The average woman tries on 10 pairs of jeans before she buys one. And instead, she's going to try these on virtually, and she's going to get feedback from her network before she buys. Not after she buys, not look at what I bought, isn't it cute, but before she buys. And so that is going to fundamentally change the way retailers need to think about their customers. So you can do something like this. This is an application called Go Try It On. You take a picture of yourself. This is what I'm going to wear on my date tonight. You post it up on the site, and people vote on whether you should wear it or not. And of course, you know, if the vote's negative, you got to go back to your closet. This is an augmented reality application that is going to be in a store. This is in Japan right now, where the shopper is holding, it looks like she's holding a dress up, but she's actually not. She's holding it up in front of her body, and now her friends online are going to tell her whether that's a dress she should buy. So at the point of purchase, she's getting feedback from her network through augmented reality. And finally, I got to talk very quickly here, the distinction between consumers and producers. One of the big stories today in business, many of your clients are probably asking you about this, collaborative consumption. That's what academics call it. People don't want to buy stuff anymore. They don't want to own it. The pride of ownership has gone away for many people. Instead, in all these categories, we have everyday consumers who are loaning you their stuff, their power tools, their books, their apartments, all of these different things. Cars, of course, Uber, et cetera, radically changing the relationship between consumers and producers. We have user-generated content. That means that you and I are responsible for putting more content out there than professionals are today. That means that advertising agencies are, let's say their roles are changing. They're not obsolete, but they're changing because people are more interested in looking at what other individuals have to create. You're all familiar with the famous Doritos campaign, very, very successful for them, where they have everyday users film commercials and they put them up during the Super Bowl. Some of those commercials, believe it or not, have polled better than professional commercials that are in the Super Bowl. They have gotten higher user ratings. Now, if you're an ad agency, you're a little worried about that probably. Now, of course, there's a downside to that, which is that when you give the inmates the key to the asylum, they're going to do things you may not want them to do because you're losing control. The traditional ad agency has control over the images they put out there. You give that responsibility to consumers, what's going to happen? Well, consumers are very, very creative. They love to take your content and play with it. These are all examples, actual examples, where consumers have taken, in this case, a brand logo, and they've kind of expressed their own feelings about the brand. So you can imagine that big companies are not very happy about this because Pandora's box has been opened, and people find things to do with products that you never would have thought of. The guy, whoever designed the cigarette lighter, never thought of it as a piece of face jewelry, right? You don't own your brand anymore. This is what I tell brand managers. They don't want to hear it. And what I say is, get over it. Right. Those days are gone. You don't own it anymore. You share it with your customers. And customers, again, are going to do all kinds of things with these images. This is my favorite Halloween costume that you never even thought of. And some of those, you know what, are going to be good because you're going to see what they did, and now you're going to incorporate that into your own new product development strategies. So today, instead of the traditional metrics that we talk about, brand awareness, have people bought my brand in the last 6 months, et cetera, we have something like this, where we talk about engagement metrics. That is, we don't measure what people bought, we measure how motivated they are to discover with you what their brand means. And that's totally changing the way marketers assess ROI and the value of their different communications. So again, in the old days, we had these little boxes, and sometimes we call them market segments. Today, we have communication patterns that look like this. This is what people look like when they're talking on social media. So it's radically changing the entire assumption we have about putting people into boxes. And all of these categories, fundamental ways we think about people, I submit to you, are obsolete, and we need to forget about them. So I encourage you to break some boundaries, whether it's with Pokemon Go or something else. Have a good time,
That is so
and
recent.
thank you.
That was great.